Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening. Appreciate you doing that wherever you are doing so. Whether it's America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or via podcast, I thank you for taking the time out of your day to catch up with what I'm catching up on. And one of the stories that is like that beeping red light off to the side where you sort of spot it, but you haven't really paid attention because you're looking dead ahead. But now we need to pay attention to. How about this from WSB-TV here in Atlanta? Channel 2 Action News giving us this story.
The FBI is now looking into reports of racist text messages sent to people around the country and here in Metro Atlanta. They threaten to enslave people and force them to pick cotton. We want to warn you, some may find this story very disturbing. And Channel 2's Audrey Washington is live in DeKalb County after speaking with one of the youngest people to get that message.
Right, Linda, I also spoke with the professor here at Emory University. He specializes in cybersecurity, but as you said, I spoke with a 13-year-old boy who told me he received a racist text message that told him he would have to drop out of school and go pick cotton as a slave.
Wow.
I am one of Donald Trump's associates, and your cotton picking sessions are from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
The text message is beyond offensive.
You will be dropped out of school and become a full-time cotton picker, making 75 cents an hour. Sounds good.
13-year-old Caden Reynolds, who is in the 8th grade, told me he received the text on Wednesday.
I was scared. And
What were you scared of?
that I was going to get picked up and out of school and have to be a cotton picking, pick cotton in slavery.
Caden's uncle, Richard Reynolds, said he stepped in immediately.
So I just reassured him this is not true. It's probably, a hoax, and just told him you can be whatever you want to be. We're not returning to slavery.
Law enforcement agencies are now investigating similar incidents out of Alabama, Virginia, South Carolina, and right here in Metro Atlanta. This message sent to a woman in Atlanta reads in part, "You have been selected to pick cotton at the nearest plantation."
That is horrible.
Rajiv Garg is an associate professor of information systems at Emory University. He said anyone can get a phone number over the internet and write a simple code.
You can send messages to any number of people.
Thursday, he showed me how the text messages can be sent to people by gender and race.
Send messages only to a selected demographic. That's a code. You just copy the code. You don't need to install anything. You go to Google, you run the code, and your messages are gone. Like whichever message you want.
As for Caden, he told me he hopes all of the racist text messages stop.
And just stop discriminating other people and just be friends with one another.
Now, I spoke with the FBI here in Atlanta. A spokesperson told me that the national headquarters of the FBI, those officials there, have been notified. So we, of course, will stay on top of the story and bring you any new developments.
Additionally, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Cassidy Alexander and Ernie Suggs, students at Clemson University and the University of South Carolina have reported receiving similar messages. According to the Greenville News, Clemson police are investigating, and the University of South Carolina is coordinating with state and federal law enforcement agencies, according to that news outlet. I mean, as long as those federal law enforcement agencies continue to exist. Sorry, it's hard to ignore Project 2025 when Project 2025 plans are rolling out before our very eyes. They also reported that Nathaniel Smith having dinner with his 24-year-old niece when her phone buzzed with a similar text messages. She said, "Look what I got," and showed it to me. Nathaniel Smith is founder and CEO of the Partnership for Southern Equity, an Atlanta nonprofit. The message said she had, quote, been selected to be a house slave at the nearest plantation. Be ready at 8 a.m. sharp on Monday. According to this piece, Smith's niece is one of dozens, perhaps hundreds of mostly young black people across the country who reported receiving racist text messages in the wake of the November 5th election, many of them college students. I'll include the AJC piece in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Reading still, the text messages have since continued, according to the FBI. The agency said Friday that the recipients have now expanded to high school students, disgusting, as well as Latino and LGBTQIA plus communities. Some of these recipients said that they were told to join a re-education camp or were selected for deportation, according to the Friday news release. I go back to the immediate aftermath of the November 5th election results, and I was marveling at the number of folks on social media who were sharing congratulations and praising God and the work of Jesus here in these election results, and I can't pair the two. Naturally, Donald Trump doesn't strike me as being a deeply moralistic or religious person, and anyone who thinks otherwise, in fact, most folks who call themselves evangelical Christians and conservatives concede that he is not a godly man, that he is at the very least in their minds, I guess, a vessel being used to carry on the evangelical Christian mission, ideology, I guess. Those folks are sharing congratulations and praise and caricatures of Jesus with his hands on Trump's shoulder. And the folks on the other side are sharing crisis hotline numbers and imploring DACA recipients to go ahead and apply for their extensions, and veterans being implored to go and stock up on their medications in advance, get their vaccinations taken care of because RFK Jr. is coming in. We're just not the same people. I mean, I don't remember after the 2020 election results came out, I don't remember MAGA sharing crisis hotlines. We've got, boys taunting girls on campuses with chants of "Your Body, My Choice." Nick Fuentes, Donald Trump's scuzzy white nationalist pal, took to social media to amplify that. Trans youth, already terrified at life in general, are unsure what their future can be like. DACA recipients living in fear, and those who love them are too. I mean, let's go back to the reproductive age girls here and what they're hearing from boys on the campuses. "Your body, my choice." And the man just reelected to the highest office in the land. Obviously, he has his history, his conviction, his sexual assault history. Well, I mean, not even just allegations, but hear the man for himself.
She's still very beautiful. I moved on her, actually. She was down in Palm Beach. I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and fuck her. She was married.
It's huge news, Sarah.
No, Nancy.
Yeah.
No, this was marriages. And I moved on her very heavily. In fact, I took her out furniture shopping. She wanted to get some furniture. I said, "I'll show you where they have some nice furniture." I took her out furniture. I moved on her like a bitch, but I couldn't get there. And she was married. And all of a sudden, I see her. She's now got the big phony tits and everything. She's totally changed her look.
Your girl's hot as shit. In the purple.
Whoa!
Yes!
Whoa!
Yes, the Donald has scored!
Whoa!
Oh, my man! Wait, you gotta look at me when you get out of your legs.
Set this up.
That is very
You give me the thumbs
Look
up.
at you. You are a
You gotta put the thumbs up. You gotta get the thumbs up.
Can't be too happy. Else off first? Yeah, let me.
It's very
You
funny.
gotta give me the thumbs up.
You and I will walk down.
Oh my god.
Maybe it's a different one.
Better not be the publicist. No, it's her.
Yeah, that's her, with the gold. I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
Look at those legs. All I can see is the legs.
No, it looks good.
Come on, shorty.
Oh, nice legs, huh?
Oof, get out of the way, honey. That's good legs.
And then Billy Bush and Donald Trump are navigating their way off the bus. And
It's always good if you don't fall out of the bus.
yeah,
Like Ford, Gerald Ford, remember?
again, trouble with the door handle
Down
here.
below.
And then listen as the tone changes as they actually greet a woman.
Hello, how are you? Hi.
Trump, how
nice
are you?
seeing you.
Pleasure
Terrific.
to meet you.
Terrific. You know Billy Bush?
How are you?
Nice to see you. How you doing,
Very
Ariane?
good.
Doing very well, thank you. Are you ready to be a soap star?
We're ready. Let's go. Make me a soap star.
How about a little hug for the Donald? He just got off the
Would you
bus.
like a little hug,
Okay,
darling?
absolutely. Melania said this was
Bushy. I
okay.
just got off the bus.
Bushy.
There we go.
And that ruined the career of one of the men in that tape. But it wasn't Donald Trump. Yeah, so you've got black people getting racist text messages. It's now expanded to Hispanic Americans, the LGBTQIA plus, and that's not even the end of it. Of course, now we have the looming Attorney General, Matt Gaetz. Let's get this from ABC News.
There are real questions about whether some of Trump's picks will be able to make it through the Senate confirmation process. Senators making it clear they want more information about former Congressman Matt Gaetz in particular, who was nominated to be Trump's Attorney General. This morning, a growing number of Republican senators making it clear they want to see the House Ethics Committee report into Trump's pick for Attorney General Matt Gaetz. The bipartisan committee was investigating Gaetz for allegations of illicit drug use and sexual misconduct. Sources telling ABC a woman testified he had sex with her when she was only 17, and a lawyer representing another woman telling us his client testified she witnessed it. Gaetz calling the allegations invented and saying it would constitute false testimony to Congress.
I have not had a relationship with a 17-year-old. That is totally false.
Sources telling us the committee was preparing to vote to release that report as early as this week. But then Gaetz resigned from Congress after being nominated by Trump, abruptly ending their investigation. House Speaker Mike Johnson on Friday, after spending the night at Mar-a-Lago with President-elect Trump, arguing now the report should be shelved.
Of course.
I believe it is very important to maintain the House's tradition of not issuing ethics reports on people who are no longer members of Congress.
Still, it is senators who have the constitutional power to consent or not to a president's picks, and several now saying they want to see what the House investigators found.
Unless, of course, they try the end around and do the recess appointment, which, again, just shows you that justice doesn't matter to men like Donald Trump and his inner circle. They'll find a way around it. And then you've got the looming Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, the Fox and Friends weekend anchor.
Kyung, what are you learning about this investigation into Pete Hegseth there in California?
Well, this does date back, Brianna, to 2017, and this alleged assault took place about 90 minutes from where I'm standing here in the city of San Francisco in Monterey, California. What we have learned from the city of Monterey is that its police force did investigate that, quote, alleged sexual assault involving Pete Hegseth. They do not specifically in their news release state that Hegseth is the alleged assailant, but it does go on to say these details, that this alleged incident occurred in the early morning hours of October 8th, 2017 at the Hyatt in Monterey, and that this was reported to local authorities, to the police department in Monterey, 4 days after this alleged incident occurred. I want you to take a look at this picture from Facebook, and this comes from the organization, the California Federation of Republican Women. You can see there that Hegseth is standing at a podium. Those pictures confirm that he was indeed a speaker at their conference at that hotel. Now, there is also in the news release that we got from the city of Monterey an unnamed victim, and it does cite injuries, although it's not specific as to who was injured. And the injury is described as, quote, contusions to right thigh. We did learn from the city that they do not plan on releasing the full police report. We also did check with the county courts. His name, Pete Hegseth, does not come up as a defendant in any criminal charges dating back from 2017 until today. As far as Hegseth's camp, his lawyer says that, yes, this allegation did exist, but those charges he was never charged, and this is just an allegation that's out there, Brianna.
However, by the way, that is Kyung Law with CNN reporting. However, he did pay the accuser off. Why? CBS News, Katrina Kaufman reporting that Fox News host Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's pick to serve as defense secretary, paid a confidential financial settlement to a woman who accused him of sexual assault out of concern that the allegation... Are you sitting down? That the allegation would lead to his firing from the cable news giant. He was more worried about losing his job at Fox News and the repercussions that this allegation would cause his television career. Less concerned, it seems, they are about it derailing his nomination to be the Secretary of Defense, the number one guy at the Pentagon. Fox News has higher standards than the incoming president of the United States is setting for our U.S. military's leadership. Let that wash over you. Let that settle in. A friend of the show, Jay Bookman, actually tweeting that sort of narrative. Pete Hegseth paid off a woman accusing him of sexual assault because he feared losing his job at Fox News if it became public. Put another way, Fox has higher standards for weekend anchors, than Trump does for Secretary of Defense. Or as TikTok user Sweeper698, I wish I could find the bio on this guy. I don't know who this is, but he spit some facts. This was just 2 days after the election, and this is how he felt. And we're trying to come out of that malaise, and yet every news cycle, every cabinet appointment, every new headline, this is what sweeps over us.
The reason I'm so heartbroken, destroyed, and absolutely disgusted with the results of this election is that it invalidates everything I have ever been taught about how I should live my life, and everything I've tried to teach my kids. So it's an absolute betrayal to realize at 57 years of age that when it comes really down to it, over half of this country really doesn't value the notions of being kind, being generous, loving your neighbor, being accepting, having empathy, showing understanding, being truthful, being ethical in business, being sensible and level-headed, not being a bully, not being selfish, and not being a total asshole. And because I've been taught these things my entire life, it's really easy for me to see that Donald Trump is a vile and despicable human being. He exhibits everything that I have been taught to set my sights against in order to be a good, functioning member of society.
And ever since the election had been called for him, we have seen all of the antithesis of what we were raised to be, how we were raised to treat others, speak to others, address others. We have seen what his victory brings out in his base. Do you remember anything opposite of this, mirror image of this from the left in the aftermath of the 2020 election? Actually, the only ugliness I remember in the aftermath of the 2020 election was what culminated after a couple of months of simmering over on January 6th, 2021, when we saw a lot more of the antithesis of what we were raised to act like and be like, gracious in defeat. The Ron Show, back after this on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms, by the way, and everybody seems to be flocking to Blue Sky. I'm there at Ron Show ATL on Blue Sky, still on Twitter X, mostly just to keep an eye on the crazies, although I chime in from time to time. Facebook as well, Instagram, Threads, at Ron Show ATL. You can visit the website. I encourage folks to do that all the time when you're listening to an episode of the show and you're like, where is he getting that? I cite my sources. I learned that, I want to say it's like fourth grade book reports, right? I cite my sources. I'm still having to teach that lesson to grown-ass adults on social media. Your source, where are you getting that from? Don't just copy and paste some verbiage and then make me look for it. Cite your sources. That's what I do. With each show, I give you show notes. That's what I call them at ronshowatl.com. By the way, you can help keep the show afloat. Like, you don't hear commercials in the middle of the show, right? I mean, if you're listening on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, they take commercial breaks. I give them that when I stop and move on to a next segment. But if you're listening via podcast, there are no commercial breaks. You can help contribute to the show. Megan did. Thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate that. She said, what did she say? Here it is. She says, please, no need to send a mug. I offer to send a Ron Show mug for a contribution. She says, thanks for your coverage of Georgia Dems. Okay, cool, thanks. By the way, we are hearing that Representative Nikema Williams, my congresswoman, is looking to set the table to step aside as leader of the Democratic Party here in the state of Georgia. She is a full-time job in and of itself as being a congresswoman, right? And so there are those who are like, well, maybe we need a full-time position head of the party. I don't disagree with that. I'm not going to sit here and criticize the work that she's done. I think she's done a credible job, but it is also a full-time job. And I look forward to seeing some of the names that might be bandied about to lead the state Democratic Party from where she will hand it over to. There. I think that's a diplomatic way of saying, I don't think she's done a bad job, but I think someone needs to give it its full-time attention. How about that? Thank you, Megan, for your contribution. Calvin, by the way, with his monthly contribution, you can do that as well. RonShowATL.com. Later this week, we're going to speak with Elizabeth Weil-Greenberg from The Appeal. She's covering why the city of Atlanta's mayor, why is Mayor Andre Dickens trying to scuttle a popular pretrial diversion program here in the city of Atlanta? There is a city council meeting about that today. She's going to report on that for us at The Appeal, and we'll have her on to discuss. Also, when we come back, former Mayor Secretary Pete Buttigieg sat down and had a lengthy conversation after the election about misinformation and disinformation and how we combat that. I'm going to give you some of the audio from that and weigh in as well. And we have to talk about why the African-American voter in the state of Georgia was the one demographic that saw a decline from 2020. Curious, right? That later this week on The Ron Show here on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So, one of the themes post-election that folks on the left are sort of coalescing behind is messaging and how the Democratic Party hasn't necessarily always been really good at messaging. And sometimes it's not just that they're not good at messaging, it's how the opposition is really good at mismessaging, disinformation, misinformation. I mentioned last week that Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, once a Democratic primary presidential candidate in 2020, to me is really good at messaging. I think first of all, he's very cerebral. He is an Ivy League grad and a war veteran, decorated, and speaks in a manner that I think doesn't come off as too professorial, too Ivy League, can, I think, summarize ideology in a manner that people actually get. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. I mean, listen, we live in a country with a 5th, 6th grade reading level. You've got to boil things down. I don't like to necessarily say dumb things down, but you've got to boil things down when complex problems come with complex solutions, but you need the voter to understand the gist of your solution. And sometimes even the gist of the problem, because not understanding how the problem came to be is going to lead you down the wrong road. If you don't understand, anybody who's a problem solver, it can be an auto mechanic. If you don't understand what caused the vehicle to be damaged under the hood, what caused, oh, you didn't put oil in it? Oh, well, that explains why the engine burned up. You sometimes have to understand how you led to having the problem. Why did your engine catch fire? Did you put oil in it? They want to know causation. Remember, I've talked a lot about immigration, root causation of migration from Central and South America leads to immigration solutions. Anyway, Secretary of Transportation, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, sat down at Harvard and at an Institute of Politics Q&A with one of the school's faculty and took questions from students. And I thought it was pretty illuminating. 2 questions in particular. Here's the first one.
Hi, Secretary. Thank you for speaking with us. My name is Ethan Morales. I'm a 3L at the law school. It's also an honor because my first political experience was running the UC Berkeley chapter of your primary campaign in 2020.
Well, thank
I apologize for not doing enough. My question is about local governance. Blue states have a lot of policy successes. They're the innovation and cultural capitals of the nation, and they outcompete red states on a lot of metrics. Yeah. But urban deep blue areas shifted right more than any other geographical subset in this last election. And when you look at places where Democrats have trifectas and supermajorities, places like my home state of California, it's hard to ignore some visible problems of urban disorder or cost of living, housing supply constraints, and above all, state capacity, especially in areas like transportation, which makes it hard to do the liberal promise pitch, which is that we can effectively solve problems collectively. Yeah. So my question is, in the next 4 years, when local and state government is all that we have, what are some policy solutions that we can begin to work on to repair these problems and indirectly the reputation of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised this. And again, if it sounds like I'm tiptoeing, it's just to stay clean on staying out of partisan talk. But one thing I believe, and I've been reflecting on it a lot in the last week, and I say this, I did not come here to add to the pile of takes. that are out there. There are plenty of takes. There's some really good ones, like John Della Volpe's recent piece. There's some half-assed ones. I'm not here to offer a take. But one thing I believe, and I believed it in 2017, I wrote it in 2017, and I still think it's true, is that in moments like this, our salvation really will come from the local and the state levels. Something that, again, sometimes Democrats have lamented, right? Our federalism, like we kind of would like a little more consistency at the federal level. But a lot of the answers are going to come from mayors, from communities, from states that aren't captive to some wacky ideological project. They're just focused on getting things done. Now, embedded in your question is the fact that we haven't always, those of us left of center, haven't always covered ourselves in glory when we've been given a free hand to get things done. I think a really good project for a lot of folks in the academy to take on is to evaluate which states that had a trifecta used it better than others, more creatively, or got better results for it. In particular, there is healthy introspection going on right now on the left on the topic of how we may have gotten in our own way in terms of getting stuff done. The one that's provoked the most discussion, I think, from people like Ezra Klein and Matt Iglesias is around housing. But of course, transportation and clean energy projects, this is clearly something we got to look at too, right? There's a forthcoming analysis. I'm only in the first few pages, so I'm not identifying with myself with it until I actually read all of it. But Mark Dunkelman has a book coming out called Why Nothing Works, where he points to the fact that there are two different instincts in progressivism. One is to use, like you said, the liberal, what do you call it, the liberal collective promise?
Oh, I said the liberal promise that we can solve problems effectively collectively.
Yeah, so which of course implies using the tools of government to do stuff, right? And we're protecting people through government. When I do an airline regulation, it's to protect people through government.
Right.
Because we know that there are things that make people unfree, like a corporation unchecked, and government can help. But of course, progressives also have an instinct to protect people from government. And steps that we've taken to make it harder to build certain things, we came by them honestly, especially when you think to the previous question about how transportation projects rolled over people's neighborhoods, right? We got to include those voices.
That's right.
But maybe we've, in the name of doing that, which we must continue to do, we've gotten in our own way in terms of actually delivering things. So that laboratories of democracy premise about what cities and states can do, I actually think is going to be wildly important, not just in quote unquote resistance, although I do think AGs and states and mayors sometimes standing up to Washington will be very important in the next few years. But in terms of just getting things done. And the good news is we have handed states and cities about $500 billion to use to get that done, which they're now fast underway in doing. And I think it'll bear a lot of fruit in the second half of this decade. It would have been politically convenient if it happened in the first half of this decade, but that's just how long these things work. So let's study who's doing it better than others and learn a lot from the people who are doing it right.
You know, that actually makes me think about the two local transportation initiatives that were on ballots here in the state of Georgia. And Bill Torpey wrote an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about the Cobb and Gwinnett measures. And TLDR, the too long didn't read summation of this, is that in Cobb and Gwinnett counties, because these are two counties, bedroom communities, where folks just haven't had mass transit and are so used to not having it. If they've got two cars in the driveway or the garage, they don't see mass transit as something that they need right now. It doesn't help them now, tomorrow, next month, later this year, next year even, or in the next 3 to 5 years. And the prospects of another sales tax or an additional penny or whatever the missive is, whatever the vehicle is, the vessel for getting the funding is, mass transit doesn't help them right now. And that's problematic. It's problematic. It also begs the question, when did America lose its vision? Like its ability to have a vision? When John F. Kennedy promised we'd have a man on the moon by the end of a decade. Man, it was a hell of a mission. And Americans were like, yeah, we can do this. Let's do this. And Americans seem to have lost their appetite for that kind of vision. And I don't know when we lost it. I don't know if when you can pinpoint it, or it's a culmination, a collective of events. Maybe it was 9/11. Maybe it was the Vietnam War. I don't know how far back we go. Maybe it was the housing crisis. Maybe it was the pandemic. Maybe it's just a collection of all these things. But we seem to have, as a people, lost our ability to have a vision. I joke sometimes to friends, and sometimes on the show, I think from time to time, speaking of transportation, that I'm a little mad. I want to know where are the flying cars and the moving sidewalks that were promised us? We don't seem to have a vision or an appetite for that. And we have to get it back, because I think long-term plans and long-term solutions have to be part of a collective vision, and we seem to be going the opposite direction. All right, one more question that came from that sit down.
Thank you. My name is Mark. I'm a first year at the college. I'm also from the Midwest, just from Southern Illinois, so it's a bit different. I grew up in a very different political environment than most people in Illinois, and very similar to how you might have grown up in South Bend. And I was introduced to you through your book, which was actually mentioned earlier, which I was very happy about. And I wanted to thank you for writing this book, because it was really my introduction to American politics and to the idea of trust between parties, but between everybody in the U.S. And I really wanted to ask, ever since you wrote this book, is there anything that you would add or any advice that you would give on the basis of what you wrote in the book for anybody here or anybody who's doubting, as you had said, going into maybe public service after what has happened over the last 4 years or 4 days?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for picking up the book. I appreciate it. By the way, the first book I read with the word trust in the title was written by David King, who wrote Generation Trust in response to how 9/11 shaped my generation. Let me say this. One theme that was in the book that I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about is how we get information. So you recall I wrote up a little bit these studies on vaccine misinformation, and the fact that Russia didn't just push anti-vax message. Often what they would do is they would push an anti-vax message and a pro-vax message at the same people, because the point was just to get you at each other's throats. And I think a lot of that's happened recently. Yes, they had a preferred presidential candidate. But their biggest objective wasn't to have for one side to win. It was to break down our trust. It turns out all the nuclear weapons in the world are not capable of doing what this information vector into our society did with shocking efficiency.
Exactly.
And we're behind. I don't just mean like those who are on my side of the political spectrum are behind. I think America's behind.
Yep.
Here's something to think about in terms of trust. For the last 100 years, it's been possible to more or less decisively settle a question with photographic evidence, right? If you're trying to prove whether a thing happened or not, if you're trying to establish whether somebody's telling the truth or lying, in politics, in the courtroom, whatever, one of the best tools you could use to try to establish the truth was a photo. That's basically not true anymore, or it's about to be not true, right? The AI stuff is so sophisticated. We're kind of getting out of the period where already with the deep fakes and stuff, we're kind of graduating out of that. Now, on one level, that's terrifying, because it's one symptom of the fact that right now we have never had more information and we've never been less informed, right? That's the result of the information bombardment we're living with, and the having our news feed be decided by an algorithm instead of an editor, right?
Memo to Elon Musk.
On the other hand, if that was true for the last 100 years, then that means it was not true for the thousands of years before the 1920s, right? So what do we do before that? I mean, we had signatures as a means of authentication. It's useful, not exactly impossible to defeat, right? But there were people who helped figure out what was a forgery and what was real in the 17th century, right? So we've got to be harder targets for this misinformation stuff.
Yes.
And we got to recognize that sometimes the misinformation that comes at us won't just be designed to attack a person. It will be designed to attack our trust itself. We just lived this in a huge way in Hurricane Helene response.
Which side echoed that?
And there's only a couple solutions I know of. One is to get things and people offline. Again, I think this is a mayor's instinct. You run into somebody at the dog park and they're the same person who is just horrible from behind a keyboard, but you're actually talking to them, they're not so bad.
Yes.
I did with Elon. I mean, I don't know if you followed this. Like he texted this thing, or he tweeted this thing that wasn't true about the FAA. And I just asked him to call me, and then he did, and then we solved the problem. I'm under no illusions about the bigger picture, but, that happens, right? So one is try to find people offline when they're better than when they're online.
Or why I say the Kamala Harris bus tour or the Stacey Abrams events has to go out to areas where they may be caricaturized and eviscerate that caricaturization. Or why maybe you go do the Joe Rogan podcast.
The other is to actually understand the dynamics of the information space. And this is a message I have in particular for young people who are ready to make yourself useful in the political and social life of this country. Because we've got to be harder targets. Look, I bet in the 17th century, if I was walking down Harvard Square, if we had a Harvard Square then, or outside of Massachusetts Hall, and somebody handed me a pamphlet that was printed on a printing press, I would have been pretty impressed. I would have been more inclined to believe it. Because, not everybody has a printing press. This must be legit, right? And then over time, we became more sophisticated. If you should find yourself reading a hard copy, well, you got my book. So if you find yourself reading a hard copy of Time Magazine or the New York Times or whatever, sometimes your eye falls on newsprint, and it's designed to look like an article, but it's actually an ad. And it only takes your brain half a second to realize it's an ad. You just have some pattern recognition that tells you, right? We don't have that at the same level on the digital stuff. And every time we form it, a new medium arises. We're going to have to figure out how to pick through that and really understand what's real and what's not real, right? That's the difference between the person who is correctly upset with the administration because we haven't solved their economic problem and the person who is happy with their economic circumstance but has been led to believe that unemployment is an all-time high in the United States of America, right?
Bingo.
If we can at least be having politics over this, then it's over reality. And if we're getting dinged, it's because of something we actually got wrong. So I think those themes of trust and what we do in order to have access to the same reality matter more than ever. But I don't have the prescription, other than more time offline. And let me add one other thing, more circumstances that pull us offline. I think military service does this. I think any pattern of belonging that is not predicted by your political affiliation, that can be in a faith community, a neighborhood, a sports team, whatever. Find those, because those overlapping circles are really important. But the rest of it, not to put it back at you, is kind of what this generation is going to have to help us lead the way out of. Because my generation clearly can't figure it out.
True.
Our generation, right?
Yeah.
And you just heard essentially why I believe Pete Buttigieg is, if not the future of the Democratic Party, an ingredient in that solution recipe. Back after this. Final few minutes of the Ron Show, and I want to thank you for listening. I also want to come back to the transit question that came up in the midst of my sharing conversation with Pete Buttigieg at the Harvard Institute of Politics that I just shared last segment. Again, Bill Torpey in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I will include his op-ed in the show notes at ronshowatl.com, opines about what it is that failed to transit votes, where folks, he believes, say, I'd rather just drive. Got to get a little bit of background here. Cobb and Gwinnett County are both counties that are bedroom communities in Metro Atlanta, and they have not always been blue counties, but they are very much blue counties now. Cobb is a little weird in that, I say weird, it's purposely weird, in that it is a blue county and has been for a while. It voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and for Kamala Harris. I believe it was 57%. And I think he says that in the op-ed, by the way. It also voted for overwhelmingly for Stacey Abrams in the two gubernatorial races in non-presidential years. It is a blue county. It is a blue county where it still has a Republican, I don't want to say stronghold, but good grip on its county school board. And while has seen a deficit in its county commission by a 3-2 deficit, it is also, because of the state legislature drawing maps, meddling, I call it, because the state legislature, in its overarching authority, getting to draw boundaries at the county level, which to me never made any sense, has fought off one of the county commission seats. They literally drew Jerica Richardson out of her commission district to make it so that, well, you can't serve that district, so we have to go with a 2-2 and it's be a bog down. Anyway, Cobb County is a blue county. It's just that the Republicans at the state level are doing their damnedest to make sure that it still gets run by Republicans, even though the majority of the county, again, votes blue. Gwinnett County is a solid blue county now, and it used to not be, but it is now, and it has been for quite a while. Anyway, Bill Torpey, writing about the two failed transit ballot initiatives, And I don't know that anybody was all that excited about these two ballot initiatives, which I think has a lot to do with disillusionment and the fact that in Atlanta we have a complicated history with mass transit because MARTA, Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, doesn't have a good public face. It had MARTA money thrown at it through a special purpose local option tax in DeKalb, in Fulton, and City of Atlanta. And a lot of that money had to be scaled back. Inflation hit them hard too, and they've had to scale back a lot of their dream wish list projects. And it had people going, well, gosh, we went from having, new rail lines and new stops to, oh, here are some more bus lines. Well, that's not exciting. Nobody's excited about bus transit. Bus transit has been around since, the 1920s? It's 2024. We're 100 years later, and we're still talking about bus transit? I mean, it'd be akin to saying, hey, listen, we're going to have a new horse-drawn carriage route that's going to... Nobody's excited by that. That's not mass transit. I mean, it is sort of, but not really. When people think of mass transit, they think of high-speed rail and light rail and hard rail. And hard rail is expensive, and so nobody's excited about that anymore. Although I would say the better route to take with these transit initiatives isn't to say, hey, we're going to develop these new bus rapid transit. Again, if you have the word B or the letter B and bus attached to it, it's not going to be exciting. I think it's more along the lines of just saying, here's what we want to do. This is what we need. This is where we need to start. Yeah, it's not going to be cheap, but this is what's necessary. In Cobb County in particular, to me, it's simple. You don't like MARTA, great. Then fine. Develop your own rapid transit authority that attaches to what MARTA plans to do. Like, say, we're going to meet at the state line, or at the county line, I should say, the Chattahoochee River, and you're going to connect your rail with our rail at a station there. If folks have to get off, they have to get off because you guys don't like MARTA. Whatever. We need a connection to the Battery Atlanta, which is in Cobb County. If you want to extend it to Kennesaw State University and the city of Marietta, great. That would be great. We'd love that. I would love to be able to get on something here, make a connection at the Cobb Galleria station, say we're going to do it there, and then I'm on to the Battery and I can go to a Braves game. If I want to stay on instead and go to a Kennesaw State basketball game, or you've got a student who lives here in Old Fourth Ward who wants to go to Kennesaw State, well, great. Now they don't have to do housing up there or have their own vehicle and deal with traffic. They can go right on to Kennesaw. You don't think Kennesaw State would appreciate that? It would grow their footprint. People could live anywhere in Metro Atlanta and go to Kennesaw State. The same thing with Gwinnett. We want to connect Atlanta to the University of Georgia, and Gwinnett is the thoroughfare. You don't think that would be popular? That's how you have to. You can't say, well, we're going to do a new network of buses, and it'll be bus-specific lanes on highways. Well, that doesn't make any... First of all, we're already stuck in gridlock on these highways, and you're going to yield another lane or add another lane will fix it, to somehow create mass transit. That's just 100-year-old technology. Nobody's excited by that. And that's kind of the too long didn't read version of what Bill Torby talks about. People look in their driveways, they've got one or two vehicles, and these measures aren't going to solve their problems. They're still going to be stuck in traffic, and they'd rather just keep what little money you think you're taking from them to build that. They'd rather just keep that money and stay stuck in traffic. I say this all the time to people, and they're shocked. The Georgia Department of Transportation contributes not one dime to public transit in Metro Atlanta or any community in the state of Georgia. And maybe that's something that needs to change. It just needs to come from the state level. And we do have a gubernatorial race coming up. I would say that candidate who's running from the left needs to offer a vision. I talked about vision of a state connected to its airports and its capital city by rail. And that'll get us the mass transit that we need in Metro Atlanta as well. That's the kind of vision I believe that would excite Democratic voters to show up in 2026. But who am I? That'll do it for today's Ron Show. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. as well on America One Radio, 11 p.m. to midnight at Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. Listen then, wherever you like. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Back tomorrow. Have yourselves a great day. We'll see you then.